Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Nisim 95.9 and 100.1, and also live on Facebook. You can follow the conversation with the handle ETV Ghana and share your thoughts with us. You can also join us with your thoughts using the hashtag Fact Sheet, and your thoughts will be read live even as we have discussions tonight. So, what's our focus tonight if you're looking at the facts and the data, as we always do live on ETV's Fact Sheet? Tonight, our focus has to do with a very thorny one, which has to do with, ratings, credit ratings in the country, and the fact that over the period from about 3 weeks back, Ghana's credit ratings by these credit rating agencies has not been a good one. We had somewhere in January, Fitch giving us a rating from B to B minus with a negative outlook, which was indicative of pressure that was going to be on the country. Then we had S&P also get their rating of the country, indicative of the fact that Ghana was going to have a stable outlook with a B minus rating. The final one, which broke the camel's back, was that of Moodys. Moodys gave Ghana a CAA1 from a B3, and which triggered the conversation which we're going to have tonight. Immediately after the rating by Moodys, the government of Ghana protested, saying that there were some inconsistencies with the rating of Moodys, and the fact that they rate Ghana CAA1, and again they say that Ghana was going to have a stable outlook, was inconsistent with the figures, and therefore they wrote and protested. On the back of that, there have been several conversations as to what these ratings necessarily mean when it comes to our economic growth and the drive to lift Ghana as to where we are presently with COVID-19 ravaging our economy. That's what we'll try to understand tonight if we are talking about the various ratings when they come out, and what they mean if a country is rated B, B minus, or C. And we'll try to make sense of these numbers or these ratings according to Moodys, according to Standard & Poor, and according to Fitch as well. And so tonight we'll make sense of these figures. We'll also try to understand the content of a letter which has been trending on social media as well, which was raising concerns about Moodys rating on Ghana, and which was coming from the AU. And for that matter, it was coming from the African Peer Review Mechanism, which I'll share with our viewers this evening. I'll just read a bit of it, and then it will set the tone for our conversation tonight. And it says, Moody's inaccurate rating downgrade against government of Ghana. And the letter was signed on the 8th of February 2022. It says the African Peer Review Mechanism, an autonomous entity of the African Union that supports African countries in the area of credit ratings, undertakes routine reviews of rating outcomes assigned by international credit ratings agencies on African countries. The mechanism provides the support through research, member states, peer learning, periodic reviews of ratings, advisory services, and technical support missions. On the 4th of February 2022, the APRM noted that Moody's issued a rating downgrade of the government of Ghana's long-term foreign currency sovereign rating from B3 to CAA1 with a stable outlook. The new rating assigned indicates that the government of Ghana is subject to a very high risk of failure to settle the sovereign bonds or coupon payment when they are due. Moody's downgrade of Ghana places its rating one notch below that of the Fitch issued on the 14th of January 2022 and that of S&P Global issued on the 11th of September 2020, which currently places the country on B- with a negative and stable outlook respectively. The government of Ghana has expressed reservations on the rating, and this is the second time that Ghana is raising concerns on the inaccuracies and the hasty rating decisions by rating agencies. Moody's should have accordingly paid due attention to the issues raised. The APRM supports and corroborates the observations made by the government of Ghana in a statement which highlights significant fundamentals that contradict downgrade action by Moody's in addition to the technical inaccuracies in Moody's assessment highlighted by the government of Ghana. In a statement, the APRM presents the following observations in substantiating the deficiencies in rating. And it goes on to highlight some of these concerns that the government of Ghana raised upon the release by Moody's. So what people are asking is, why didn't the government of Ghana raise concerns about that of Fitch? Why didn't the government of Ghana raise concerns about that of S&P, but rather focuses attention on that of Moody's? There are those financial experts who are saying that these ratings that are coming through, are they not consistent with the IMF's Article 4, meetings that had government indicative of the possibility of government being able to pay its indebtedness to most of these institutions or bonds that they had issued, but had the possibility of being classified as a high-risk country. All these would occupy our minds tonight on Fact Sheet. When we are back from this commercial break, I'll read the letter that came from Moody's, and then it will set the tone for us tonight on Fact Sheet. My name is Samuel Eshen. I encourage you to follow the conversation and to share the link on Facebook to other groups and platforms so others may join the conversation and get educated and informed as well. We'll be right back. And you're welcome back to Fact Sheet live on ATV, live on Facebook, live on Instagram and Twitter as well, also live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. My guests to help me do justice to the issue this evening, which has to do with the credit ratings and their relevance when it comes to the outlook for a nation and its ability to woo investors into the country, especially when it comes to the issuance of bonds and its capacity to borrow on the market. We will be joined by Mr. Paul Frimpong, who is a CGIA chartered economist, and so would we also be joined by Reverend Dr. Wolanyo Mensah, who is an economist and executive director for the Center for Greater Impact of Africa. They would join me for us to try to make sense of what really these things are about and why it's important for governments to be concerned about them when they are released. So I'll try to, give some background as to what these credit rating agencies are, what they do, and the significance of their ratings on nations and even private businesses when they have given them. So these credit ratings provide retail and institutional investors with information that assists them in determining whether issuers of bonds and other debt instruments and fixed income securities will be able to meet their obligations. When they issue letter grades, credit rating agencies provide objective analysis and independent assessments of companies and countries that issue such securities. Here, there's a big history of the ratings that I'll be sharing with you in a bit. But quickly, let me jump on the phone lines and then speak to Mr. Paul Frimpong and pick his thoughts on the matter of this credit rating agencies and how important their ratings are when it comes to businesses and governments in terms of their ability to borrow and to also get support or investment from other places. Good evening, Mr. Frimpong, and thanks so much for joining us. Hello, Mr. Frimpong. Hello, good evening, Mr. Frimpong.
Hello.
I trust you're doing well.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hardly hear you. If you could kindly raise your voice for me, I'd be very much grateful, Mr. Frimpong. Hello, good evening, Mr. Frimpong. Hello? All right, too bad. It looks like we're having a bit of a challenge with Mr. Paul Frimpong's line. We'll try and make connection with him and then continue with the conversation live on ETV. But if you just join us, we just started a conversation and our focus is on the government's protest of Moody's rating, which they believe has some inconsistencies and so needs rectification. But the question people are asking is, why were there no concerns about that of Fitch, about that of S&P, but that of Moody's is attracting a lot of concerns, especially with the AU wading into the matter and the government of Ghana protesting vehemently on that matter. We'll try the phone lines again and see if we can get Mr. Frimpong on the line and continue the conversation. Once again, good evening, Mr. Frimpong, and thanks so much for joining us. Hello, Mr. Frimpong. All right. It looks like we have a bit of a challenge with Mr. Frimpong's line. We'll try and re-establish contact with him. So I'll go on and share with you some of the importance of these credit ratings and why it matters to government when they are graded either B plus, B minus, A, or even C, which has gotten us to the point where we are all talking about the Moodys rating. Now, credit rating agencies provide investors with information about whether bond or debt instrument issuers can meet their obligations. Agencies also provide information about countries' sovereign debt. The global credit rating industry is highly concentrated, with 3 agencies being the topmost ones: Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and then Fitch as well. Credit rating agencies are regulated at several different levels, and the Credit Rating Agency Reform Act of 2006 regulates their internal processes, record keeping, business practices, and many more. And so that would situate the conversation in proper context for us. But we'll quickly dash to the concern that had been raised by AU with respect to that of the Moody's rating. But I said that I was going to share with you the letter that Moody's had written with respect to their rating of Ghana. This was issued on the 8th of February, 2022. All right, so I believe that we may have Mr. Frimpong back on the line. Let me try and see if I can establish contact with him. Mr. Frimpong, once again, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm hoping you're doing well, sir.
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you.
All right, so I was trying to paint a picture for my viewers tonight as to the significance or how important these credit ratings are and why governments pay attention to them when they are put out there. How important are these credit ratings, sir?
They are very much important, and they have been important for decades now. If we look at the history of credit rating, so we saw the first credit rating that was put out there by Moodys. That was in 1909. So we are looking at about 100 years ago that we had the first bond credit rating from these credit rating agencies. And typically what they sought to do is to actually put an assessment or quantify the assessment of a borrower's willingness and ability to pay back a loan within the confines of the loan agreement without default. And if you look at the history, credit rating is applicable to individuals, corporate entities, as well as government. So when you look at the individual side, that's where we have the credit bureaus that do that to determine whether you as an individual, you are credit worthy and you are not going to be at a risk of default of paying back the loan. So in advanced economies like in the US, I'm sure we've all heard the term, I'm building my credit line, I'm building my credit, because there, without your credit score meeting a certain threshold, it will be very difficult to get access to extra funding, except to the one that you already are making, right?
Okay.
So same applicable to government and corporate entities. So what they've sought to do, and to be clear, these are research-based opinions. So the key word here, the two key words here, they are research and methodologically based, but they are opinions, okay, from these credit rating agencies. But what that has sought to do over the years, it has helped to streamline the person that wants to borrow and then the person that has the means to lend, to align their interest in a very safe environment. So the work that this credit rating agency does is actually good when looked at the corporate side for the stability of the world economy, as well as the economy side, of course, it's also good for stability. Because in every way, if you do not apply certain measurements and certain assessments, someone might be at risk, and that could be very detrimental for the entire world. And trust me, the way some of these credit rating agencies are, some are solicited, some are unsolicited. So the solicited means that you, as an entity, whether it's a corporate or a government, would want to approach these credit rating agencies that you are about to introduce a bond, let's say a carbon bond, into the market. But before you do that, rules and regulations regarding investment in these bonds. So where you'll be getting the funding from in terms of want to borrow for this bond, they are guided by the fact that they are not allowed to invest in bonds that have no rating attached to them. Because then you will never know the ability of this borrower to be able to pay you or otherwise. So in the solicited way, governments and entities actually approach these credit rating agencies to rate the content of the bond based on their ability to pay back. And of course, we have the general unsolicited ratings that are being done by these agencies. Of course, that makes them more authoritative as agencies that you have to come to if you are going to the market to raise money from. So the work that they do, even though it's based on facts, it's based on methodology, it's based on assessment and research and data, they are opinions of these agents. And it has been like that for over 100 years. And it has guided the global investment flows, especially when it comes to the debt market, international debt market.
So you talk about research and you talk about data. Where do these agencies get their data from?
Of course, they have the history of most economies that they provide ratings on, okay? And of course, in Ghana, we have various data, various sources of data that they get. They work from, they get access to data pools from the World Bank, from the IMF, from government-owned publications, the MPC meeting by the central bank, the budget that will read the components of these budgets, all seen the 2022 budget, and how much of our revenue we say we are earmarking to pay for or to service mature loans, and what percentage of our revenue is being used to pay maturing debt, and what the consequences of the COVID-19, what has happened. So all this information are available to them, and they gather this current data and then mix it with the history. I mean, based on when we went to the international market for the first time to borrow and how we are doing in payments, what were the conditions at those times. So when you do that, they are in the position to actually make their opinion on what they believe is the current state of the Ghanaian economy. Now,
this brings me to a piece which Bloomberg had published. Again, the Bank of Ghana raised concerns about the figures they're in with respect to that particular article that Bloomberg wrote, which had to do with, our standings, our outlook out there. And we all know Bloomberg to be a very credible source of information when it comes to financing and then, matters to do with business and then the economy. And yet the government protested some of the figures that Bloomberg had churned out. And if you compare some of those figures that Bloomberg had churned out to that of some of the figures that the IMF had put out after meeting with the government of Ghana somewhere in 2021, some of these projections were consistent with that of Bloomberg. And yet the government's position was that its local statistical data it had was in variance to the figures that Bloomberg was working with, and therefore could not be the position of Ghana. And thus I ask, these figures that, let's say, Fitch or Moody's or S&P may be working with, are they really necessarily a true reflection of the data that Ghana may have?
Yeah, like I said, these agencies work independent when it comes to the unsolicited ratings. Okay, so for them, they are where they are based. They gather their data based on what is happening locally, what is happening in the international debt market, what has been the trend. We've all seen our debt to GDP is skyrocketing beyond sustainable levels. We've seen the struggles that the current government is facing in terms of getting hold of our financial difficulties. We've all seen the issues about the e-levy that you're trying to raise money to ensure that we'll be able to recover or at least be in a certain stable environment so that we can leverage on that for further growth. At least that's the reasons that they've given for the e-levy. And there are conversations about whether we are supposed to go to the IMF or we should still stick to our homegrown policy. So for me, I think we all appreciate the fact that we are not in a good economic position currently. And I think we've all been, witnessing the difficulties that the managers of the economy are facing. When you read the budget that we had this year, obviously we have a focus. We have a focus on revenue, but we've not really dealt with the issues about our expenditure. Okay, because when you look at as an economy, we are dealing with two things, right? We're dealing with how much you are bringing in and what you are spending on, or how much you are spending. Okay, so if our conversations in these difficult times have always been about revenue, but we've not actually been able to decipher very well how, what the value is on these expenses that we are going to make, okay, and where we can cut back and close some loopholes, and I think that can help us. So for me, there are a lot of negative nuances happening in the economy now, and we all appreciate it. So I'm not surprised that we are getting these kind of ratings or grades from these rating agencies, irrespective of what the government says it has in terms of data. We've all seen what is happening locally.
Now, the pushback from government, especially when it comes to that of Moody's rating, is what I want us to focus a bit of attention on before we move on to other matters. Try to understand what these alphabets really mean. Now, at some point in January, Fitch came out and said that they had moved Ghana's rating from a B to a B minus with a negative outlook. We didn't hear much from government as to whether the position of Fitch was good or it wasn't good, or whether they disagreed with them or not. Then we had S&P also come out with theirs being a B minus, consistent with that of Fitch, but they said that there was a stable outlook going forward. Then finally we have that of Moody's, which rates Ghana C, and then the government says it really is inconsistent, especially if they say that they are rating a C, but they're saying that the outlook is okay. Why does that of Moody's necessarily take center stage when they all seemingly are painting the same picture as to the outlook for Ghana?
Well, for me, I think it's neither here nor there. These agencies have been doing the ratings of Ghanaian economy. We've seen some of them have done it for about 13 times, which is S&P. They've been doing the ratings on Ghana. Fitch has been doing it since 2009. They've been rating Ghanaian economy. Of course, it's always difficult to take in when your economy is downgraded. It's something that if you have any counter information, of course, you would have to present it. Because what that does is that eventually it affects your credit worthiness, and obviously increases your cost. And even bonds that you've loaded or you've floated already could have some negative impact, as we've seen in this rating that has come out. So we would have to, wait further to see how these numbers from the government and what they are basing on, whether it will be able to stand the test of time, right? So, like I started by saying earlier, these rating agencies, whatever score they give you, whether it's B, B minus, whether it's A, B, whether it's triple A, or what have you, these are opinions, and of course, they are subject to scrutinization. So if you think you're in a government and you have been graded unfairly, obviously you have every right to present your counter data and make it known. It's rather unfortunate that because of the work that these credit agencies have been doing over the period, it becomes very difficult for a government position to overtake their publication. So just like recently saw that Fitch actually reversed their ratings within about a week or two after their publication. Obviously, if we're able to present that these parameters that we use, we believe is not the same. This is what we have, and then you can confirm from these other credible sources. If it's correct, like what we are having is not the same as what we have, then obviously, I think they will be able to come back to do the needful, just like what Fitch did recently. So it's neither here nor there. You have the right to protest. You have the right to question these credit scores. But then in the long run, I think if we look deeply into what is happening in Ghana currently economically, I think one will not be surprised that we are getting these kind of credit scores.
Now, let's try to break it down for our viewers and our listeners on NISIM 95.9 and then 100.1. What an A would mean for a country or for a business if they are rated by any of these three major rating agencies. What a B would mean and what a C would mean for a country or a business entity.
So I'll use the Fitch rating as a base here, as a base case. So Fitch rating starts from triple A to D. Okay, so it has triple A, it has double A, it has an A, it has a triple B, double B, B, triple C, double C, C, R, D, and D. The triple A is the highest credit quality. Okay, and this shows the lowest expectation of default rate. So if you are rated triple A, it means that no event happening currently or within the expiration of the loan agreement will alter or affect your ability to pay. So no matter what is going to happen, so assuming you've gone to the international capital market to raise, let's say, a bond that is going to mature in 7 years. When you get a triple A rating on such a bond, what it means is that nothing will cause you to default on paying back this loan on the bonds that you are raising for the next 7 years, irrespective of what is going to the event that is going to happen within the next 7 years. So even if there's another pandemic, even if there's a commodity crisis, even if there's conflict, what this rating states is that when you have the triple A, irrespective of all these unmitigated risks, all these will happen, you'll still be in a position to pay. Now, as you move to double A, then there's going to be an element of risk of default being introduced. Okay? So when you move down to up to B and B minus and B plus, and you move to D, which is the last one, it means that this loan will definitely be defaulted. So that's how the rating is done. Okay, so the higher you are from the triple A as it descends to A, double A to A, to triple B to B, then the risk of default also increases. So that is how these ratings are done.
But interestingly, aside these reports by Moody's, Fitch, and maybe S&P, There are other reports by the World Bank. There are other reports by the IMF, all painting a certain picture as to the dire situation government finds itself in. I mean, they go ahead to write that although the outlook looks positive, Ghana stands a chance of being classified as a high-risk, country when it comes to its ability to service its indebtedness to most of these loans that would have incurred, or most of these bonds that would have issued in the past. So where does the issue come in? Again, on the back of the fact that we already know that the government hasn't got fiscal space when it comes to going to the international market to go and borrow. We are concerned about our debt to GDP and our debt portfolio. That's whether Fitch says a C, whether Fitch says a D, that space ain't there to borrow.
Look, the positions of the IMF, the World Bank, and the sort of parameters, the sort of components that they base on to make their projections, as they've been doing all these years, at a point differ a bit from what the credit ratings also do. The fundamentals could be the same, but they all look at these projections with a different eye view, all right? So when you look at the IMF, the World Bank, of course, they look at a lot of factors. They look at population, they look at mortality, they look at literacy, they look at productivity. There are a lot of things that
Paul,
goes into...
Let me pause you a second and share this information with you, which comes from the IMF. And this is information they got interacting with officials of the government of Ghana. At the end of the day, when they gave their appraisal of their interactions with the government of Ghana, this is what they say when it comes to our public debt management. They say that public debt is assessed as sustainable provided that the authorities credibly and rigorously implement a medium-term fiscal adjustment such as the fiscal consolidation plan announced in the 2021 budget. The plan is expected to stabilize the debt path in the medium term, even though key DSA indications are that okay, all right. Hold on 1 second. I'm trying to get the final bit of it, but the page seems to have been interrupted. But all that they seek to say is that regardless of these ratings that are coming through, it paints a certain picture, and that picture toes the same line as virtually what these credit rating agencies are talking about.
Definitely, that's what I started by saying, right? So we are all here. I mean, fortunately for us, we are all living in Ghana now, and we've all been following what is happening from the corridors of those who are managing the economy. We've seen statements and documents from the managers of the economy, and we are all witnessing the tightness of the current, economic situation that we find ourselves in, where we've seen debt to GDP at its highest level. And of course, that is why, like I said by saying earlier, the government is saying it's a make or break point for us to be able to ensure that we implement this e-levy among other sources that they think they can rake in locally or implement local policies other than going back to the IMF. And the IMF is right to point out, to refer us to some of the fiscal adjustments and other policy programs that we already have actually mentioned in our previous budget, and that could have helped us to have a very fiscal discipline, because in times like that's why I started by saying that we need to look at some of these things from both sides. It's not almost always about revenue, but we have to also look at the value for money which goes to the expenditure side. Okay, so if we were able to implement some of these fiscal adjustments, that in fact we already set up a fiscal monitoring committee or so under this government, which sought to streamline how monies are being spent by government. So we have to be very deliberate on how. Of course, we're trying to appreciate the situation that we find ourselves in post 2019, which is the COVID period, and as a result, we've seen expenditure balloon. But of course, we cannot put all our blame on the fact that because of COVID, we had to spend and spend and spend.
All right.
And that is where we might find ourselves wanting. So for me, as you said, they told the same line, even though they don't use the same
measurements.
Some of the parameters are not the same,
right.
But it all sends the same signal that we find ourselves in a very tight economic situation, and we have to be very deliberate and appreciate the fact that we have to do something and now to ensure that we do not go down negatively further.
Paul, I thank you for your views tonight on the show. Reverend Dr. Wolanyo Mensah is in the studio with me, and I'll be picking his thoughts for the next few minutes on the show, even as we go for a break and back. And welcome back. This is Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1, also live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can join the conversation with these, platforms. Your thoughts also you can share with us, even as we try to make sense of what these credit ratings are and why it's so important to government and the businesses when we are discussing them, especially when they give ratings that the governments feel are not favorable to them. Now, prior to Reverend joining us in the studio, I was reading some report, IMF report, issued in July, 1st of July, 2021. And the bit that talks about debt sustainability analysis of Ghana, this is what they say. They say that external and overall debt are at high risk of debt distress. The external rating results from breaches of the present value of external debt to GDP until 2029 and breaches for debt service for exports and debt service to revenues over the full-time horizon. The overall risk of debt distress is also high because of the PV of public debt to GDP exceeds the benchmark for the full horizon. Doc, good evening.
Good evening. And good evening to our cherished viewers across the country.
I hope you're doing well, sir.
Good by grace.
So this is a report that the IMF gives as to its outlook in terms of the debt sustainability of Ghana. How different is this from the ratings that Fitch, the ratings that S&P, and then that of Moodys gives us?
Well, thank you very much once again. I think by and large, we are coming out from the post-COVID. And the post-COVID economy calls for more proactive measures. And gradually, the global economy is moving from a traditional economy to a more digitized economy. And so that calls for some kind of migration from an orthodox economy to a more digitized economy. And so government needs to restructure, realign, and readjust its policy and programs. You realize that the various research that has been done, they express a professional opinion that you equally have margin of error. And so, but in a large scale, you realize that it has really projected the areas where the economy have weaknesses. I think that they were looking at two main issues: the growth of the economy and also the performance of the government's policies and programs. And so, if you compare the two, you realize that the growth of the economy per the evasion of the COVID-19 has repercussions on the business community. The small, medium, and large-scale enterprises suffered a lot, and even today, some businesses are struggling to come back to business. And so if you concentrate on that alone, and if you also concentrate on the debt portfolio of the country, you also realize that our debt is so high. But then the debt equally needs to be serviced, and also we also need to have value for money for what exactly we use the money for. So when we lack accountability processes and procedures, when we lack those checks and balances in the system, definitely you are going to have research findings like this, that the economy has been downgraded. And it's a true reflection, because the great policies that the government has, planting for food and jobs, one district, one factory, one village, one dam, one district, one warehouse, where are they today? So if really you are not proactive in championing your own policies, not any policy that somebody is imposing on you, these are a policy based on which Ghanaians voted for you. So if you fail in championing this policy, then invariably you are going in a reverse gear. And so I think that it has really projected the true nature of the economy. But meanwhile, the economy have also seen some form of improvement in the area of looking at the basic fundamentals. 4 years ago, we exited IMF Conditionality and bailout. And you realize that now we are managing the economy ourselves. So managing the economy ourselves now, I think the indicators are more favorable than before, because as at 2016, how was the inflation? Inflation was around 14.5. Today, as a black man is managing affairs, at least it's not up to 14.5. So you see that there is some form of improvement. But then if we were to have value for money, there are a lot of monies. Auditor General's report is there. We are not putting any mechanism in place in order to retrieve all these monies back to the system. Our national expenditure is so huge to the extent that it has chopped into our revenue generated. And with all this, the international players and observers will definitely rate you down, because you are not making good use of your potentials and resources.
It's interesting, the point you make about the efforts by governments. You talk about the industrialization drive, the one district, one factory, one village, one dam, and the rest of them. But I ask, let's say Fitch had given us an A rating, Moody's, let's say a B, and then let's say Standard & Poor had given us, let's say, an A. What necessarily would this have done for us, seeing that our debt to GDP already is a burden for us? Our debt portfolio is of a concern for us. Now, these industries that you talk about virtually have not been able to grow to the extent where they can shoulder the country. What necessarily would an A rating by any of these three agencies have done for us?
I wonder if a developing country or middle-income country can get an A. Simply because when you look at Ghana's economy, it's more of an import-led economy. We import more than we export. And obviously, you are a dependent economy. And dependent economy meaning you are not producing much, so you can't be awarded A.
But let's say the outlook is that of a positive outlook. Let's say a B plus from the three agencies. What would that have meant in terms of investor confidence and our ability to borrow, seeing that our fiscal space is limited at the moment?
Well, all depends on government's policies and programs. If, like for instance, all these social intervention policies, including even the free SHS, if they were to be managed very well, at the end of the day, we can get a B+. And so what necessitated for an increase is if when you are able to really roll out these policies and programs effectively, and there is a value for money, then obviously, even if the economy is not growing faster and there is a proper management, effective and efficient utilization of resources, you score higher marks. So it also depends on where the organization stands. So if he's concentrating much more on the basic fundamentals, I think the country will be scoring higher marks.
Let me rephrase my question.
Exactly.
Now, one, revenue drive. Government projects that it may raise some over 100 billion targets for revenue.
Exactly.
Government projects that it will spend maybe around 137 billion as per its projection. That 100 billion that government intends to raise, already there's a problem there. 78 million of that, from what we know from the toll booths, is off at the moment. The government is intending to push the e-levy in order to rake in some revenue. And so what I'm thinking is this: how really important are these ratings at a time when even our revenue targets to meet them is a concern to us, seeing that whether it's a B, whether it's a B+, necessarily the money to do these things?
Exactly. You realize that with this rating, sometimes beside it's being a professional opinion that they are expressing, most at times too, it doesn't reflect on the local economy. It's just like you are using two methods of analyzing the performance of the economy, whether market value or book value. These are purely statistical work, and most at times they don't take into consideration the practical economic happenings in the country. And sometimes people can pay to really look good with these kind of ratings. And so there are these possibilities. So I think we should rather be interested in the findings. The findings really tells you where your strengths and weaknesses are. But if you want to concentrate on alphabets, whether A, B, or C, at the end of the day, somebody can pay it and be able to push that agenda and have A. And Ghanaians will begin to shout. That is purely a book value. But market value, when you go down to the market, or how there is, if there is an improvement in the living standard of the people, every individual to be able to speak for themselves. So we are saying that what is happening in the local economy, most of the times it doesn't match with this book value. But unfortunately, these are standards that is used globally, that the investor communities look at all these ratings to be able to take a proactive professional decision as to whether the economy is viable, the economy is favorable for investment. But I think that if Ghana government is really serious of value addition, most of our raw materials are still being exported outside the country without any value addition. So we need to domesticate and we need to add value to our raw materials. Diversification is key. So if we are not able to achieve that, and even we score A, Ghanaians will continue complaining. So we should look at the homegrown approach of how we can better the loss of Ghanaians, rather than looking at statistics and this kind of academic exercise.
Well, my time is fast spent. I would have loved under a minute for you to answer this for me. So, when political parties are in opposition, these things are very important to them, especially if it's going against the incumbent, the government in power. When they come into power and these ratings are not in favor, then they raise concerns about these same agencies that they believed in just a few years back. Is there some hypocritical posture on the part of politicians when it comes to these research-based figures when they are put out there?
Well, when you are in opposition, you concentrate much more on the academic informations. That is more of a political informations. But when you assume power, it's about the real economic situations. So that is where we have those variations. But I think that the politicians should equally be much more interested about the real economic situations. Because that will inform your decision as to how you even prepare your manifesto. Because most of the things we put in the manifesto in practice is unrealistic. And so when they meet the real economic situations, you see that their rhythm changes, the attitude changes, and the conversation changes totally. So I believe that it's like you are a spectator and later you are now a player. It's a different ball game.
Reverend, I thank you for making time to join me tonight.
It's a pleasure, and I believe that you are doing a great job for Mother Ghana, monitoring you from far, and how you have been an inspiration to a lot of the youth. I think that you have a great future.
I thank you, sir.
And thanks so much for this station for doing a great job for this very country.
I thank you, sir. I thank you, sir. And I was joined tonight by Reverend Dr. Wolanyo Mensah, sharing his thoughts with us as to the impact these figures that are thrown at us, what they really mean. And so was I joined by Mr. Paul Frimpong, also sharing his thoughts with us tonight on Fact Sheet. God willing, tomorrow there'll be a repeat broadcast of the show on ATV. I encourage you to join at 10 a.m. But join me at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow morning on the Happy Morning Show when we begin to set the agenda and to discuss the issues of national interest. Good night. Girl Vibes is up next.